Check. Hello, hello. If anyone is out there in YouTube land, let me know. Let me know you can hear me, you know, the usual routine, and that you can hear the guitar. I have, in the past, done a full webinar, not a webinar, one of these live streams on Facebook for almost an hour. Nobody could hear me. Nobody told me they couldn't hear me. I just went on my merry way. Not good. I've got my tea. I'm ready to go. I'll flip back here. I am with you. Hey, Tony, my man, my main man. Can you hear me, Tony? Can you hear the guitar? Thanks, Tony. We're just going to hang out for another minute or so, and then we'll get going. right. Let's go. If you're here, let me know you're here. Put your name in the chat box. I like to see who's here. And then we're going to talk. This is the newer book. Oh, well, it's not a new book. This is the, let me go to the other screen here. This is the one that I read a little ways back, The Talent Code. Greatness isn't born, it's grown. And it's an interesting exploration into talent, what we think of talent, and what we think happens when someone has it. And so if you're interested in that process, you might want to check out The Talent Code. This is by Daniel Coyle. And there are lots of musical examples, of course, because I think a lot of us seem to think that people who play music are born into the world with the ability to play music, or at least some amount of wiring up for it. So, if you want to explore those questions and have a better sense of how that all works, go check out that book. The one before it, the other day, was This Is Your Brain on Music by Daniel Levitin. So I just thought it would be cool as I do some of these presentations, if there's things that I'm currently reading or have read that I think are pertinent for us as learners on this journey of learning the guitar, that you might be interested in some stuff out there that you would otherwise not know about. And so if you're looking for some good reads, some intellectual stuff, if you're into that, I'd highly recommend it. Check again. Yes, it's Stephen. What do you think of acoustic electronic guitars? Please, can you... Well, I'll turn the mic up a little bit if needs must. How's that sound, Tony? Bit better? You can let me know. It should be a good enough mic. I'll test it with my earphones too, or my headphones. Earphones. How silly am I? Yep, I can hear myself through there okay. It's a wee bit of hiss going on, but I'll turn that down so I don't need to hear that all myself. Let me know how that sounds. And we'll go from there. All these dynamics, guys, that have to happen just to give you a streaming experience. Okay, sounds better. Good. And, getting more and more comfortable with the whole notion of live streaming. And hopefully as time goes on, I'll be able to add in more characteristics to it to make it a bit more exciting for people. But bottom line is here, aren't we here to learn some stuff? And, excuse me, in our situation, we're doing part 2 of building chords using intervals. And thank you to all of you who touched base with my inquiry as to whether I had gone too deep with that content on Monday. As I mentioned in the email, I felt as I was going through, I might have bitten off a bit more than you guys were comfortable with. You seemed not to be uncomfortable with it overall. That although it was new, gladly enough and happily enough, you were comfortable with the way it was presented and explained, so that it maybe even little trickles of insight start to happen. But I'm going to try to use today's session to solidify that a bit more, and then we'll just get into the rest of what should have all happened on Monday but we'll just continue on because there's a few more tweaks to the process, and and maybe by then more light bulbs will go off for you, which would be cool. So, all right, let's do this. I am going to start by, if you have a guitar, by the way, well, you might as well have it in hand because I'll have some questions. And they're easier to answer, of course, if you have a guitar. So let's go ahead and play our lovely D major chord that everyone's familiar with. Now here's the thing. You, me, guitarists are familiar with this primarily from the point of view of shape, which the guitar is very good at revealing. We use the shape of things as a memory cue or clue to what the sound is going to be and how to associate the name of something to the shape. For example, people see that and they go, yeah, that's a D chord or a D major chord. All is good. So that's one layer of seeing the chord, which I think everyone's familiar with. Another layer of viewing the chord is, again, if you've been hanging out with me for any length of time, you know I'm a big fan of this, that you should know your chords based on their notes, the notes that make them up. It is the notes and where they're located that creates the chord shape that you're so familiar with. And on that point, just as a bit of an aside, I've never had anyone ask me in my career of teaching, when I would show chords to a starting student, no one has ever asked, Stephen, why is the chord the shape it is? For example, that's D. And if I took that shape and, well, I shouldn't say it that way. If I played what to you know as a C chord, I'm wondering if people see them as shapes, why they've never wondered. In general, I've never had the question asked, why is that called D and why is this called C? Why isn't that called D and this called C? After all, if you're only seeing these things as shapes, I could make up any shape and say, okay, I'm going to call that a D chord. So the silliness of what I just said starts to make a bit more sense when you think about this idea. Nobody ever in the history of music ever woke up, let's say on a Wednesday morning, could be Thursday in some parts, on a Wednesday morning and said, behold, on this day I shall create a chord, wherever that word came from. There it is. And it shall be called D major. Why? Why would it be called D major? Why don't you just call it Kapla? Why don't you call it Rinky Dinky? Why D major? It's interesting to me that nobody's ever asked me why are they called what they're called and why are they the shape they are. It's just taken on faith that that's what it is. And that shape viewpoint gets so integrated into your nervous system, and it produces results for you, of course. It allows you to play songs that you want to play based on knowing that a certain chord needs to be played at this time, so you play it as you know it. But that process continues for such a long time that by the time the good folks like you come on board and meet someone like me who says, hold up a second, you've been seeing your chords as shapes on certain strings, certain frets, using certain fingers, far too long, to the exclusion of the way you should also be seeing them, and you should have been also seeing them all along the road that you've been using shape, ideally. I know it doesn't work that way, but ideally. I mean, piano players do it that way. They don't learn that a C chord is just this shape on keys. They know the notes that make it up. And they very quickly also know the intervals that make it up. It goes hand in hand with how they learn progressively on that instrument. The guitar seems to just get the shape part. So hence, I'm a big fan of helping students know what's going on underneath the surface. So if I said to you, great, it is a D, it's called D, so there's something about D that's important about it, and I'm always surprised at how many people don't even know where a D note is in that chord. It's just the reality of guitar. So you can see it from the point of view of notes. There's a D. There's also the fourth string D that gets included with it, but let's eliminate that for a moment so that we only work with the top three strings. So we have a D on the second string, third fret. If you know, it would be good that this is an F sharp on the first string, second fret, and this is an A on the third string, second fret. By the way, it's just much more efficient to talk to musicians and say, no, you need the A on the third string instead of first finger, second fret, third string. It's just a mouthful to try to describe that one location. Just call it an A. End of story. That's it. Excuse my voice. So, that's the second layer you can see it at. Today and Monday, we are at a third layer of seeing these chords. When you see that shape, I'm hoping that not only eventually, if you haven't done it yet, you'll see it as D, F sharp, and A, which of course those notes could be played anywhere else on the fretboard. D, F sharp, and A, that's a D chord. D, F sharp, and A, that's a D chord. D, F sharp, and A, that's a D chord. They're everywhere. And they can be on strings that are not consecutive. So you could have, I'm just making this up now, see if it works. I could do D, F sharp, and an A way down there. So I have to skip the fifth string. It's a beautiful sound. That's a D major chord right there. Nobody ever plays that around the campfire. Mostly because it's not easily strummable. Okay? There's more than strumming that makes up the guitar, but it is a big part of guitar, so I get it. But that's really cool to have that insight that just with that little bit of knowledge, you could find D chords anywhere you like. It's just that this is the one you got shown first, it's the one you use the most, and it's the one, therefore, that your brain goes to when it makes the connection between the word D, or D major, and I go plunk. That's that. So the third layer is to recognize that not only are there notes there, but the distances between the notes. That is, alphabetically speaking, from a D note to an F sharp note. Let's disregard the sharp for a moment. If you just went alphabetically starting on, D, you could go D, E, F. It's an F sharp, but just forget the sharp for a moment. Just think in terms of the letter. That F is 3 letters away from the D. So you include the D in your count. When we experience that distance from D to, we'll call it F sharp now, is referred to as a third. It's 3 notes away. There's no mystery to it. And the same effect happens from D to the A note in your chord. Well, how far away is an A note from the note D alphabetically? Well, again, I'll do it this way. Get the mic out of my way. I tend to give the root note of the chord, in this case it's a D, that's what the chord's named on, so therefore that note's important. We call it the root note of the chord, the foundation of the chord. D, E, F, G, A. It's 5 notes up. Therefore, the A is a fifth away from D. So musicians can eventually start thinking this way about a D chord. They have a root, a third, and a fifth. And they talk that way. You know, they'll talk about roots and fifths, and roots and thirds, and perfect fourths, and minor thirds. And what happens over time and experience, remember, I've often referenced the experience side of things as you've got to get into the sandbox, and you've got to take some quiet time, some nappy time, and go into exploring the guitar with some little idea you have. Okay, it's about intervals on this particular day. So you explore. You know the notes, you explore the distance, you make some connections that are meaningful to you and only you, and you grow from that over time as a musician. It's not just about playing songs. It's about learning the craft of your instrument so that the playing of songs is easier. So that's where we're at. And we could repeat this process on any of the chords you're already comfortable with. The chords I chose, as you know, I'll just pull I'll pull one of them up as the reference image, was that one. So that is a G major chord, but it's fingered differently. And it's not very practical, but it's a good chord shape to start from to help you see the interaction of shape and notes and intervals. So we're trying to get all three of these layers happening at once. That's kind of the goal of what I'm trying to accomplish on this session. If that's making sense so far, please let me know. I'm looking back now in the chat box for a moment. Richard, good man. Hi. I'm very well. Thank you for asking. I'm finding this information invaluable. It starts you thinking as you play, giving plenty light. Awesome, my friend. That's good. Yep, default position, D major, open chord. That's me. That's just about everybody. That is very real. I would like to suggest, let me go back to my other screen here. I would like to suggest that if that's you, if I said, okay, let's go grab a D, not right now and not for this session, but I would want you to be able to say to yourself, I've never grabbed any other D chord, but I think I could, because I understand where the notes of the D chord come from. Hint, D major scale. And I have a little bit of understanding of how the chord is built. First, third, and fifth of that scale. And then I knit those together anywhere I like on the fretboard. And that's one of the best ways to help you learn where notes are on your fretboard as you get more and more comfortable with this material. Okay, so very quickly, I also want to bring up the... where is it here? I don't want that right now. I want this, yes. That's a picture of the top one is the G major scale. So that's the one we worked with last day. This is the G major scale. Tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. Talking and doing it at the same time can be a bit tricky. Now you take those same letters and you simply assign the numbers 1 through 7 to them. G is 1, A is 2, B is 3, C is 4, D is 5, E is 6, F sharp is 7, and then G is 1 again. Just that simple. Again, there are some symbols on the scale with the numbers that reference the technical name of the interval, like major second and perfect fourth and that sort of stuff. It's important, but I don't want you to fuss about it right now. I just want you to think of them as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 1 again for now. Okay? So these pictures stay up the whole time. I want them to stay there. And then I started with my reference chord. And so you can see, if you look at the right-hand reference chord, there are 2 roots. They're in red. So those are both G notes, and you can confirm that by looking at the image on the left, the chord image on the left. So you've got 2 Gs, and then you go to the 3rd string at the 4th fret, and you have a 3rd. Well, what note is that, Steve? Well, you just have to look over at the other image on the left, and you see that it's a B. And then you ask me questions like, how do I know that's a B? Well, you either know it's a B because you've been to that location a lot and you've continually reminded yourself that that's a B. That's a good skill. Or you're going to have to take a moment to go through the idea. Did I say 2nd string? I hope I didn't. I meant 3rd string. To go through the idea that the 3rd string itself is a G. You know that A is 2 frets higher. And you know that B is 2 frets higher than A. So that's another way that you would learn over time that when your finger is sitting on that string in that fret, it is no longer just a fret and a finger and a string. It's not just the 3rd string, 4th fret, 3rd finger, or whatever finger. It's the note B. And for the chord purpose, it's a 3rd away from the G, the red note that's on the 4th string of the right-hand diagram. One thing I do need to help with these is I wish I had a cursor that I could move over these images and draw your eyes specifically to certain places I want you to look. I haven't figured that out yet. There must be a way. And I'm using my mouse. I'm pointing at things, but I know you're not seeing the mouse pointer, so that kind of sucks. And then you can see the 5th of the chord is sitting on the 2nd string, 3rd fret. Well, if you go to your scale down below, the lettered scale, what's 5 notes higher than G? You go G, A, B, C, D, E. G, A, B, C, D. Oh yeah, D. D is the 5th note above G. Therefore, that perfect 5th that you see sitting on the 2nd string, 3rd fret, it's a D. And if you look over on the left-hand picture, you see, oh, I was right. It's a D. See, it's not hard. It's just unfamiliar. It's a new operating system, if you will, for your brain to understand chords. Okay, so we went through a whole bunch of chord samples on Monday to, I'll get rid of these references here, to do this. The first chord was G major. Second chord here is a chord called G major 7. Now, the only thing you need to think about for now is that if I pull up the reference again, just on top, it's a little fuzzy, but there it is. You can see that I've only got 3 letters going on, G, B, and D. That's it. 1, 3, and 5. That's all I have. But what I wanted you to do is to take the G that's on the 4th string, keep the G on the 6th string where it is, take the G of the 4th string and bring it down to the F sharp. Why did I say bring it down to the F sharp? Because if you look at the lettered scale, go to the higher G, the one on the far right of the picture. When you go a semitone below G, you end up on F sharp. You can see it in the picture. And that F sharp, if you go down to the interval scale picture, that's the lowest image on your screen, you see that that's the 7th of the scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's an F sharp. So all you were doing was moving from G to F sharp within the chord. It doesn't matter which G, anywhere, and any F sharp, but in relation to the chord, it happened to be occurring on the 4th string. So the image, the resulting image is this. That's all you did. You took the G which was on the 4th string 5th fret, and lowered it in pitch to F sharp. I'm going to keep babbling here for a while, and then I'm going to just ask you if it's making sense, and I'm also going to have a sip of my tea. And this is review, so I am sort of chugging quickly through it. This creates a new chord. Many of you thought it sounded very pretty, and it is. It's a nice, relaxed sound. That chord, because it doesn't have 3 separate notes in it anymore, it actually has 4, we call a 7th chord. In this case, it's called G major 7. It's like G major. The G major bit is still there. There's still a G, B, and a D. That's all that G major is. And we've added the 7th to it. So I mentioned flippantly, you could call it, in a way, G major add 7. It isn't called that. It's called G major 7, and it is what it is. There's a language to music that has stuck over hundreds and hundreds of years, and so people have come to understand it, whether it's grammatically correct or not, so to speak. And I mentioned also that, interestingly enough, when you play 3-note chords, which is that guy, we call them triads. Even though there's 4 notes there, you're only playing 3, G, B, and D. That's it. Let's get rid of that. Here you have 4 notes. So one would think it's called a quatrad or a tetrad. You know, the Tetra Packs of juice you could get in the store? 4 boxes of them wrapped up in plastic or something. But they aren't. They're called 7th chords because the 7th of the G major scale got added to the G major chord, and it became known as G major 7. Okay? So the 7th note of the G major scale, which is F sharp, got added in, and there's the look of it. So far, so good. Let's get rid of this. And then I said, let's take that F sharp note and lower it once again. All of this means refingering of the notes. It looks different, so I'll give you a sense of that here. Here's your reference chord. There's a G. We're now going to take that G and lower it to F sharp. I have to refinger a little bit. There's the F sharp. Here's the one we have right now on the screen. I've got to lower that note and stick it right in there in between these 2 fingers. So if you do that, it's very gnarly. If I just move that down, the whole thing gets very gnarly. So we don't do it. We just refinger it so it's a bit more comfortable. And it takes on the shape that you see. And the fingering would end up being 1, 2, 4, and 3. Okay? Less important right now. The point here is, now what you've done is you took the F sharp and lowered it 1 more semitone down. That, if you look at the scale for G major, that means the note ended up in the space between the E note, the 6th, and the F sharp, the 7. Here's the key feature, though. When you took the F sharp and you lowered it by 1 semitone, the action of doing that produced a note that's lower in pitch. So it went from the 4th string, 4th fret, down into the 3rd fret on the 4th string. You lowered it in pitch by 1 fret. You effectively took the F sharp and you flattened it. You lowered it in pitch. So the term flatten the 7th, or ending up with a flat 7, means that the action you took to get there was to physically lower the 7th note of the scale 1 fret down. So you flattened what was the 7th, you've now created a flat 7. And the key feature here is the flat 7 reference does not mean that the note you're on is a flat note. It's an action that you took. If we went the other way, we'd say it's a sharp 7. We don't really think of it that way, but that's, you could call it that. You've raised it in pitch by 1 fret. It just happens to be the G note again. So it's really the 1, not the 7, but you could think of it as a sharp 7. So that's important to realize, that the note you end up on is not necessarily a flat note. Sometimes it is. It just works out that way. But that connection is not there. Don't get lost in that. Okay. Now I'm going to go back to the major 7, right there. It's on top of the chord you were just looking at. If someone were to say to me, Stephen, when you look at the pictures of the G major 7 chord, I can see the notes. And if I look over on the right-hand side, I can see the intervals that make up the notes. Those intervals are from the red note, the G. I can see that a major 7th chord is made up out of a root, that's the 1, a third, that's the 5th, a third, and then the 5th, and then the 7th. In terms of letters, I can see that means it's a G, a B, a D, and an F sharp, directly from the scale. So the chord formula for a G major 7 chord is 1, 3, 5, 7. No matter where you play it, I don't know what chord I'm on right now. I'm not thinking about it, but I recognize it visually. You should be used to this, as a major 7 chord, and you would eventually remember what interval is what under the finger, but doesn't matter right now. You know that it's going to be made out of the 1, the 3, the 5, and the 7 of the G major scale. If I take the 7 and flat it, lower it in pitch, now I have another type of chord, and that's the dominant 7 chord, what we often call the G7, just the G with the 7 after it. So we should be saying G dominant 7, but we often don't. We just say G7. Now, if you think about its formula, you could say, well, a dominant chord, like G7 or D7 or A7, would be built out of the 1, the 3, the 5, and the flat 7 of the G major scale. This is why the major scale becomes so critical to understand. This terminology is referencing back to the major scale. It's no wonder to me that guitarists have tremendous trouble understanding a lot of what they think of as theory. I don't call it that. I call it music language. Sometimes I call it analysis. Music theory. They have trouble with it because they never got introduced to the importance of the major scale. Good day, Stephen. Hey, Sean, I'm checking the list now. That's good. Tony, flat and third, flat 7, 7 chord. Is that correct? If you removed the G, I'm looking at Tony's comments here. If you removed the bottom G string, would that be B minor? Oh, I see. I see what you're thinking. No, it wouldn't be, and you should ask me this again, Tony. Just PM me, like if you're on Facebook or something, or send me an email. PM, a private message. I never knew what that meant for the longest time, but now I'm talking that way. Here's what's happening with that question, Tony. Here, I'm going to switch back so I can see what I'm doing here. You see that chord? I think what Tony is saying, if I took this lower G and either got rid of it or maybe even put it on the 5th string, same fret, he's thinking that would become a B minor. This portion of it, without the finger, is a B minor chord. To make it fuller, you're going to have to add in on the 2nd fret all of the extra stuff that you need. So, whoops, sorry. So again, he's seeing this based on shape. I'm not saying that's wrong, but I am saying you're seeing it based on shape, and you're recognizing that that little portion of it seems to exist in a B minor chord, whether you played it this way or this way. And it's a good connection, don't get me wrong. But this is an entirely different chord. You see the difference between what the first finger does. Here it plays the low B note on the 5th string. Then if I simply move the finger to the low G and don't play the 5th string, and don't play the 1st string, it's a completely different sound. And in truth, it's a completely different chord. But good insight. It's good to recognize little things like that. No need to apologize, Jerry. People come in late all the time. And then if it was a B minor chord, he's also asking, would that be a flat and 3rd and a flat and the 7th you've got the 7th written twice. So I'll tell you this right off the top. For a B minor 7 chord, you have to remove your pinky, and you're going to have to put your index as a full bar for now. And it would be a chord that intervallically, and I'll show you this in a moment, intervallically would be 1, flat 3, 5, flat 7. It's a mouthful, isn't it? But we talk this way all the time among guitarists. Maybe you don't, because you're not sitting around a circle of guitarists all the time. And if you are, they aren't talking that way. So like anything in life, we tend to talk the way the people around us most of the time talk. And then someone else comes in and says, oh, well, then you shouldn't talk like this. You should talk like this, that sort of thing. No, not necessarily, but it happens. And if you're among English people, like British people, you will end up talking like British people. You'll have a little sting of it in your voice. I was born in Ireland, but I have spent the majority of my life here in Canada. If I went back to Ireland, I'm sure in a month or two I'd have a little tinge to me voice again, and it would come back pretty quickly. So it depends on who you're around. I would always, this is a good point. I know I'm a little off topic right now. Get yourself around people you're uncomfortable with because they're better than you. There, I said it. Don't create false impressions of your ability. I'm still waiting to be a guitarist. That's a good one. I should put that on a t-shirt. When you go to take tennis lessons, you don't expect to take lessons from somebody who's as good as you or less good than you. You want, just so you can look good, let's say, you want to have lessons from somebody who's better. You want to be around people who are better than you. And so you got to get your ego out of the mix. You got to be prepared to say, I'm the small fish in the small pond today, and I'll be there for a while, but it's going to change and I'm going to grow. The best thing you could do if you ever get opportunities to jam with musicians, I'm still looking at one at the moment. The best thing you can do is seek out jamming with people who are simply better. Now, we all know, I hope you do anyway, musicians are great people. They love to share. They really do. And if you come across one that doesn't, and that does happen on occasion, just leave. Just don't associate. If that person is not into helping you, then just don't hang out with them. That's all it is. Don't make a fuss about it. Thanks for your time. I'm off somewhere else. But generally speaking, they're very gregarious. They want to help. They love to share what they know and help you grow. That's what's great about the musical community. I love it. Anyone that makes you feel bad about where you're at on your journey, just get away from them. That's not right, and I'm just going to stick to that. But by and large, it's really good. So if you make a point of hanging out, get 2 or 3 other people that for some reason you've learned they're advancing players. They're really good. Ask if you can just join and jam in on some occasions. They might say no because they're busy with whatever, but they'd say, we'll let you know when you can come in because we'll have more time available or something. It's well worth it because that's how you learn the best. Okay, let's continue with the logic here. If I took that F note, I'm going to get rid of that image. If I took the F note and dropped it down 1 more fret, everything has stayed the same, by the way. All the other notes, the G, B, and D, has stayed the same. If you think to yourself, well, that's a G, a B, and a D. That's a G major chord. I can see that portion of it. How does the E figure in? What do I call it now? You still know that G is the root, because it's highlighted in red. You still know that it's the 1, the interval of the 1. You still know that the B note is the interval of a third, and that the D is the interval of a fifth. You can see that in the chord images there. 1, 3, 5, G, B, D. How does the E factor in? Well, you go to the first scale picture, the alphabetic scale, and you go and figure out where the E sits in the scale intervallically. So you go back to the G note, and you work your way up the scale until you hit E, and you count. G, A, B, C, D, E. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's the interval from the G of a sixth. And you therefore, without any formal knowledge of how chords are named, you could say to yourself, the G, B, and D part is a G major chord. And then if I refinger it so I can add this E, couldn't I call it G major 6? Because you've just added the sixth. You could. You could call it, and it just turns out to be, we just call it G6. It's just one of those strange things in music where certain terminologies have stuck. Whether they're completely technically correct or accurate, we just end up using these terminologies so much. I'm busy, I can't. We just come up with these. That was somebody looking for me on the phone. I forgot to put my recording session on. And so you could just look down on that and say, well, that's the 6. So it must be G major with a 6 added. G major 6. And it has a nice sound too. And you would say, okay, I can see that. I've got the G, B, and D from the alphabet scale. I can see the E, which is the 6th. So therefore, this chord is made up out of a root, a third, a fifth, and a 6. Technically, I'm not fussing about this with you today, but technically, we should say root, major third, perfect fifth, major 6. That's just a bit too much to squeeze into the brain right now. If I can just get you thinking numerically a little bit, we're well off to the races. Let's continue. I'm going to get rid of this guy. Now, let's look at this one. Now, this one still, it shouldn't scare you, but if you look at it, you say, okay, I still see a G. I see a B, but now it's B flat. Okay, I don't know what's going on there. I still see a D, and I still see an F. So you could say to yourself, when you look over now at the interval side of things, I still have a 1. I still have the flat 7 as the F note. We established that earlier on. This is flat 7 from the G. That's the interval from the G to the F is referenced as the flat 7. The D is still the 5th, but now I've got B flat. So what happened there is that we had, if you recall, the D or the G dominant 7 chord. I'll pull it back up here. for you so you can see it. Let's get rid of him for a second. You see where the B is located? All we did, now there's my B, it's under my pinky. We took that note and we're moving it down 1 fret, so it's tucked right inside in between the F note and the D note. And I've already told you with respect to the 7, when you lowered it by 1 fret, the 7 became a flat 7. Doesn't mean the note is flat, it just means you lowered it in 1 semitone. Same here. But even though you lowered the B in 1 semitone and you're still going to call it, not the flat 7 obviously, the B is the 3rd, and this is now going to be called the flat 3rd when I get back to here. And it does happen to be a flat note. That's just a coincidence. Don't make weird connections to things that don't exist. That is now a G minor 7 chord, which is very Santana sounding. That kind of flavor. And you would say that that G minor 7 chord is built from the 1, the flat 3, the 5, and the flat 7 of what? The G major scale. Again, can you start to see how important it is to know your major scales? Everything you talk about in music is referenced back to them. Know them. And the the interval picture of the scale, the lower picture on your screen, that never changes. The notes, excuse me, that interval structure never changes for a major scale, but depending on the key you're in and the chord you're trying to build, the notes that make up these intervals will change. So eventually a lot of guitarists tend to rely more on the look and shape of these intervals. For example, they learn that, I know this is a bit hard to see, that let's say G and F, that shape, they know that that's a flat 7. They know that that's a major 7. This is a flat 7. They know that this is a major 3rd, and this is a minor 3rd, and this is a tritone. And you probably know this one. That's a perfect 5th. That's your power chord. Which technically isn't even a chord. It's a dyad. It's 2 notes played at once. Chords are technically 3 or more notes. But we're not going to fuss about that. It's a power chord, and it's a root, and it's a 5th. So some of this stuff you've already had some exposure with. How's my time? Okay, let's keep going. Just stick with me here as I play this out a little further. I've only got one more to do. So this chord that you're looking at is now called G minor 7. As to why it's minor, that's a different discussion, but it does have to do with what happened with the 3rd. Anytime, I don't want to get into it. I don't want to confuse you right now. But it has to do with the 3rd. The 3rd of any chord determines whether the chord is major or minor, the type of 3rd. And this one happens to be a minor 3rd, so if that's a hint for you, that'll work. G, B, D, F. Root, flat 3, 5, flat 7. These are formulas that people remember. They're stuck in their head. So you could say major chord, 1, 3, 5. Major 7 chord, 1, 3, 5, 7. Dominant 7 chord, 1, 3, 5, flat 7. Dominant 7 sharp 5 chord, 1, 3, sharp 5, flat 7. Okay. Major 6, 1, 3, 5, 6. minor 7 chord, 1 flat 3, 5 flat 7. It's not difficult to do, you just need to have more and more exposure to it than you currently get. Okay, one more. Get rid of this guy. Where are you? There you are. And we get that one. I'll play that one for you. It has a G, an E, a flat third, and a D. The fifth string has never been played in these examples. It's always been 6 string, 4, 3, and 2, just for clarity. It's an interesting sound. Very jazzy kind of quality. But over time, when you look down on it, if you know that G is your root, you'll start saying things like this. Oh, G, and I see B flat, so that's the minor third, sorry, the flat third of a G major scale. Oh, and I see the D note, that's the 5th of a G major scale, and then I have an E. Hey, that's the 6th of a G major scale. I also played that in the G major 6. Now I just took the B and lowered it. Now I have a G minor. It's a G minor chord with a major 6 in there. If I really wanted to make it G minor with a minor 6, I would lower that. It's kind of a nice sound. But the point is that you can look down at that thing and go, yeah, look what's in it. I've got a root, I've got a flat third, a 5th, and a 6. You see the game that's going on. Now I'm going to get rid of all these pictures. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. Check this out. If I play your plain old Campfire G chord, you already know that G is a root. Once you realize that that note is a B, you'd say, oh, well, that's the 3rd of G major, G, A, B, 3 notes up. And then when you get to the 4th string, you can't see it easily here, there's no finger on it, so that's a D. Well, G, A, B, C, D. That's a 5th. So right now, as I pick through the strings of that chord, I've got root, 3, 5. And then on the 3rd string, it's also open, and it's a G. So I have another root. Don't get the impression that roots always need to be the lowest string that you are playing. It's not true. But it is a common experience for the recreational beginner, maybe intermediate player to get that impression, because the majority of chords that you get exposed to happen to have their root as the lowest note of the chord. But there's no reason why it has to be. In fact, eventually you start turning notes all upside down, have the root in the middle and 5ths in the bass and all kinds of inversions of the chord. We turn things all upside down because it's just fun. It makes things more creative, more interesting to listen to. So right now, not only do we have G, B, D, and G, which is good to know, we also have root, or 1, 3, 5, root. I won't use that form of the G for now. I'll use the more common one. So now I've got the 2nd string. It's a B, so it's just another 3rd. Whether it's this B or this B, doesn't matter. B is the 3rd note up in the G major scale. That's a B. That's a 3rd. G, B, D, root, 3, 5, root, 3, and then finally another G. There's a root up there. So we have root, 3, 5, root, 3, root. That's what you've got. If you took the time to think about that, If I took the G, the higher sounding G, and dropped it by 1 fret, which is hard to do just by lowering the finger, so I have to refinger it. I'll keep the lower notes where they are, but I'll refinger them. And I lowered it by 1 fret, now it's in the 2nd fret, and play that, you have G, B, D still, G, B, and you have F sharp. Now, if you're thinking about that G major scale, let me pull that up for a second. Where are you here? There you are. You already know that the F sharp is the 7th of the G major scale. So what does that mean? Well, you have basically a G major chord with the 7th added, so that's a G major 7. It's different than the one I showed you, but it's the same bunch of notes. They're just in different orders and in different octaves, but it's the same bunch of notes. If I took that F sharp and lowered it yet again, just like we did in the previous chords, I took the F sharp and lowered it to F, I told you that became a dominant 7 chord. Well, listen now. Root 3, 5, root 3, flat 7. That's your G7 chord. And then if we took that F and lowered it again, which made an open E, now we have root 3, 5, root 3, 6. G6. It's not this guy here. It does matter what order the notes are in, by the way, in terms of the kind of sound that you get. So it's interesting, but that's, excuse me, that's another whole course. So if in your basic chord making, if you take some time, even like if you grab an A, don't just see it as the big shape. See if you can name the notes. If you can't, okay, leave it alone for a little bit, but at least be able to access the A major scale somehow. Either you write it out or you look it up on the internet or whatever. And you would find that the notes of an A major scale are A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, and A. Wow. That's the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, the 5, the 6, and the 7 of A. And I look at this, I go, okay, well, here's an A, so that's the root. The next note, 4th string, 2nd fret, is an E. That's A, B, C, D, E. That's a 5th. This note is another A, so that's a root. So far we have root or 1. They're both the same thing. 1, 5, 1. And then here, you do some calculating again, you realize that's C sharp. A, B, C sharp. A, B, C. 3 notes up. So that's the 3rd of the chord. 1, 5, 1, 3, 5. Now if I said to you, if you want to make, let's say, a minor chord, you don't want 1, 3, and 5, which is all that we have in this chord. 1, 5, 1, 3, 5. We just have 1, 3, and 5. If I want to make a minor chord from that major chord, all I have to do is lower the 3rd. Your job is to know, where is the 3rd? Oh, it's not that one. That's E. That's the 5th. It's not that. That's an A. That's C sharp. That's the one. So I've got to take that note and lower it by 1 fret. So C sharp becomes C, and you keep all the other notes the same. Lo and behold, that's how you end up with your common A minor chord. And this is true for any major chord. If you can locate the 3rd, this is what I meant by the 3rd has everything to do with whether a chord is major or minor. If you can locate the 3rd within the major chord, you can convert that chord into a minor chord simply by lowering the third. You obviously need to know where the third is in the chord, or you need to know it in terms of the note. So you're either thinking of it as C sharp, A, B, C, 3 notes up, A, B, C, or you're thinking of it as 1, 2, 3. Either way, the C sharp or the third has to get lowered. Pretty cool. If I took a common E major chord, here are the notes that you have in it first. You have an E, a B, another E, a G sharp, a B, an E. And if you sum up all those notes, you've only got 3. E, G sharp, and B. Those are the only 3 notes that make up that whole chord. You are not playing 6 notes. A lot of people think that's what's going on. You are only playing 3. Some of them are getting doubled up. I'm a little over time. Not bad. I'm almost done. And I say to you, how do I get from E to E7? Let's pretend you've never played E7 before, the dominant chord, E dominant 7. And I say to you, well, all you need to do is take that major chord and wherever there's another root in it, right, lower that a whole tone, which is 2 frets. So what that meant is you're going to keep the lower E. Is there another one in here? E, B, E. Take that E, because you've got 2 E's, 3 E's in the whole chord. You can do something with one of them. So we take that and lower it a whole tone. That's 2 frets down. Ba, ba, ba. And you get your E7 chord. Simple. What if I wanted to start with the E chord again and I wanted to make it minor? What do I do? What did Steve say? He said to make a major chord minor, you have to lower the third a half step or semitone. Where's the third? Oh man, I got to find the third. What is the third? E, F, G. It's G something. I look at the scale or I build the scale, whatever it is. I go, oh no, it's G sharp. I look for the G sharp in the chord. It's right there on the 3rd string, 1st fret. I lower it by 1 fret. In this case, it's just remove the finger. So you go from E major to E minor by lowering the 3rd. You can start to see how important knowing your intervals really are in creating and understanding how chords are built. And I'll tell you this right now, some guitarists see chords and everything they do on the fretboard almost exclusively in terms of intervals. Obviously, if they know their intervals, they've got a fairly good understanding of the notes as well. But the interval thing, the good thing about intervals is regardless of the key, the shape of the things don't change. So their mathematical relationship, if you will, stays the same. Or better still, their geometric relationship stays the same. Whereas if you're doing it from notes, each key, it would be a different note. And so that's a little harder to grasp and do, but both are important to be able to do. There you go. That just gives you a bit of a glimpse. I'm going to switch over now. I know you've probably been yapping at me, and I haven't looked at the comments so far. This gives you a bit of a glimpse into what's ahead should you want to pursue a little bit deeper into what's going on with either scales or chords. But the big picture here is at some point in your playing, you need to rely on shape to get you started with the chord. But for a little while anyway, sort of trick your brain and abandon your awareness of shape and build chords based on either the notes that make them up or the intervals that make them up or both. That is harder up here, up front, for a little while. Everybody's different for how long that lasts, but eventually that information floats to the back of the brain, which I call the lizard brain, deep back here, and less thought is required to pull that stuff out. But it's always your choice. You can work on it or not. You could say Steve is full of you know what, and let's not bother with it. Just don't worry about it. Okay, don't worry about it. But, if you're curious and you want to know more about your craft and how it works, then the stuff would be worthwhile doing. So, okay. Kudos to you guys for hanging out and listening to that. That was a big one. I want to check some comments here. They got there. Jerry's here. Richard, it's called Talking Shop. Yeah. Tony, Steve, I'm still waiting. I'm still at the moment. Yeah. Would you play with E minor? I'm not sure what that means. I am looking at one at the moment. I'll come back to that. B flat bar chord. Are you asking me to make one for you? I can show you one. There's a B flat bar chord. This part of it just looks like an A. If I move it down here, isn't that just an A chord? It's usually played that way, or maybe with one finger. Some people do a little triangle, but doesn't matter. If you play it with fingers 2, 3, and 4, and you're playing 5 strings, the 5th string is open and the 1st string is open. If you pull up this middle portion of the chord on 4, 3, and 2, and you pull them up a fret, you also have to pull up those 2 open strings, the 5th string and the 1st string. You've got to pull them up a fret as well. That's why the bar exists. Or that's why people put a capo there to make a B chord, a B flat chord. It's technically a B flat chord, but they think of it as an A chord because it has an A shape to it. There, see, we're back to shape again. So that's a B flat chord right there. Or you could play it here. Or you could play it here. Or here. Sorry. That's a B flat. What's important is not to try to memorize all different shapes of B flat, but that will happen. Is that it's made out of a B flat, a D. So you're going B to D as your 3rd, and then F, B flat, D, and F. That's all you've got. B flat, F, B flat, D, F. That's it. And this stuff it gets in your head eventually, Really does. I have to leave now. My head is full. Yeah, I know. I've filled up a lot of heads. Really appreciate the lesson today, Stephen. I'll be reviewing it several times. Cheers. Gotta run. Awesome. I appreciate you guys hanging. If any of you who are still here have any other questions, fire them at me. I can stick around for a bit. If not, we'll let you deflate your brain and digest this stuff. But remember, it's all getting recorded, and you can always go and check it. Excuse me, back on my channel and review it. And you're always free to email me and ask questions about stuff. But I will ask, since you're here, what should we do on Friday? What can I help you the most with on Friday? You should send me an email and let me know. And if I only get one response, then I'll work on that one response. And you'll lose out. If I get 7 or 8 or 10, I'll just take the theme of those that's coming out, and I'll do that. I have had a few requests to explore modes or pentatonic / bluesy stuff. So, sky's the limit. Again, the point here is to try to give you what is of interest to you, not what I think is of interest to you. So that's why I say I can't read minds, folks. You got to let me know. Okay, looks like I think everybody's pretty much done. I've overstayed my welcome, but I appreciate you guys hanging with me for the hour or so. And these last 2 sessions have been a challenge, but I guarantee you, if I come back to them, month's time, 2 months' time, I'm going to be doing more of these, not just because of the COVID scenario. I'm kind of liking this, and I'd like to do more and more for you guys get invited first, by the way. Everyone on my list who's a subscriber, you get to see this live. If anybody chimes in while we're live, that's fine, but you get the invite to be here specifically. Yeah, it is. It is hard to remember the 1, 3, and 5 of each major chord. I get a brain freeze. But here's the thing. I'll keep saying it. It was hard to ride a bike. If you play hockey, it was hard to skate well. If you shoot hoops, it was hard to to get a ball into the hoop. Everything is hard at the beginning because it's the nervous system, the body, the brain, the muscles are unfamiliar with it. I don't know why it is in music. I'm not picking on you here, Tony, but what is it about music and playing a guitar that people think they need to get it the first time they get introduced to it? My first teacher said to me one time, I'm going to show you, I'll just pick a topic. He said, I'll show you what we did today. I'll show you a little bit of that. And I would go away like you guys, like, oh, my head is pumping. And he said, now don't come back and talk to me about what we covered today for at least 30 days. You have to go and think about it. You have to work on it a little bit, go in the sandbox, like I've said before, and play around with it. And, if you're still having trouble with it after a month of working on it, then we'll go back and fix some stuff up. But you can't even come and talk to me about it until you have given it that amount of time. So yes, I get it. Story of my life. It's more common than you know, Tony. It's everybody. It's true for anything. But people who want to do music seem to think it's not true. Or at least they're denying that it is true. So, yes, it's a brain freeze. Tomorrow, if you sat with it, it would be a little tiny bit less of a brain freeze. And on it goes. In a month's time, should you have had the discipline to do it every day, go and watch this video every day and play around with these new chord shapes every day, and every time you made them, you make your brain go, yeah, that's the root. That's the 6. Let me look at the scale. Yep, that's the 6, etc. Yeah, and it will get easier and easier and easier. Guaranteed. So I get it. All right, I'm going to let you guys go. Please, please, please send me an email. Let me know what you'd like me to cover, because if you leave it till too late, and then I'll just have to make it up myself. And then, I'm just blowing into the wind. Maybe you just love everything I'm showing you. I don't know. I doubt it, but so I could really use your help if you want something specific covered. But we'll do something. Let's take a breath and let's relax. And and by the way, it is Good Friday. If you're cool with that, I will do the session on Good Friday. I know some people may not want to do that, but I'm still here. And so we'll do something. Listen, we'll do something easy. I'll look over your referrals if you want to send me something. And if I think, nope, let's not do that. Let's go and do something easy, but make it sound really cool. That's what I think we should aim for. So we'll do that, but I don't know what the topic is yet. Steve Dempster Guitar Studio, saying bye for now. Let's do another session on Friday, same time. I'll let you all know by email. Sorry I was late today. We had a lot of things going on here. Just didn't get to it on time, but you're here and you made it. So thank you so much for hanging out. Again, if you think this is a valuable video, share it with people. Spread it around. I can use all the love possible. I'm a small fish in a very, very, very large pond. I do not aim to want to be very, very, very large, but I do want to grow my subscriber base, and I'd love for you guys to share this around. So the more people I can help, the happier I am. Take care, my friends. I will see you on Friday. Have yourselves a great day off. Bye.